Good morning and welcome to the third part of looking at Hull. Going around the southern part of the city centre. We're going from, I guess, from east to west, and ending up where we set off in the sort of Queen Victoria Square right at the beginning, which is obviously just off this photograph. Well, in fact, it is. It's just up here where we're going to end up on Monument Bridge across there. So just basically saying, I'm going to say coming down Scale Lane, this is Marketplace coming down there, but doubling back to come through Trinity Market, which is in this area, and coming back through Hepworth Arcade, onto Silver Street, down Silver Street, onto Land of Green Ginger, coming down as far as at the Land of, I think it changes into another road just here, but that comes out by the side of the Guildhall. And doubling back again then to this junction here, and coming on across Trinity House Lane, that's the Holy Trinity Church here, into that square, the grammar school, the statue of Andrew Marvell, and then the last one coming down Prince Street onto Dagger Lane, and actually doubling back up again on Poston Gate here to look at a couple of the buildings here, and then coming back down to Prince's Dock Street, and coming back up, hopefully get this right, Whitefriargate, as I say, and end up on Monument Bridge. Monument Bridge, so called because that's where the statue of William Wilberforce at one time stood. I'm going to say another fine street, which is just sort of off this, is Parliament Street along here. And the buildings along here I'll be doing from this end, but you can see from this junction here, a number of the buildings on here as well, but I'll be doing those and not actually going down that street because obviously our route takes us elsewhere. So that's where I'm setting off. So last time we finished on this sort of Scale Lane Bridge, as they call it, and then coming back to the junction here with the High Street. You can see that High Street continues along here. This was fairly badly bombed in the Second World War in 1940. And I'd say some of those have only just sort of been cleared, those sites. And then that links through here to the waterfront site, to Whitefriargate, that we sort of came along here. And that's where that new Fruit Market car park is. And so it's come a bit more sort of popular. And the Arco building is here as well, attached to that. So it's a sort of a really changed in this area around here quite a lot in the last 3 or 4 years around there. And then there's just some other ones whilst we're on this map. There's some car parking here called the Zebedee Car Park, which we'll see, and you can go down Dagger Lane to get to that one because Prince's Dock Street is locked off, but that's how people get to that car park down there that's been there since, I think, 2017. So we'll see that when we get to it. So I'm going to set off. This is where we finished last time on that Scale Lane Bridge over there. That's the width of the original stave that went down, connecting High Street to the quay side of the River Hull. So come across another pub here, because just up the road there is the Old Black Boy pub, and next door to that seemed to have opened fairly recently another pub called Fretwell's, whereas the Lion and Key was established in 1817, but get that right. I'm going to say this is the High Street that crosses in front of it. So now I'm going to just turn round and come up Scale Lane, and here I mentioned before, by the side of the Old Black Boy, there's another sort of pedimented archway here, similar to that one we looked at higher up. This was once a street or an alley that went through, and because they came in as an L shape, so you could walk along here and out by the top side of the Old Black Boy, and that's called Burnet Avenue. I think I mentioned it last time, where you could see that same pediment on top of the door. So that's what Burnet Court is today. And so it would have been just the width of an alley. Now, immediately across the road from that is the oldest domestic property in Hull, sometimes called the Old House Bistro at one time, and now just called the Old House. It's the dates from around about the 15th century, and can't properly see it now, but it was jetted on 2 floors, not as as much as there would have been in the sort of the York properties, such as those down the Shambles and things like that. But you can just see where the jetty slightly just comes out at this floor and that floor up there. So that's what that blue plaque is to along there. I guess it's been altered a great deal, probably in the 18th and 19th centuries as well. Just next door to that, just tucked in there, this is the end of sort of that Burnet Avenue building, but just tucked in here is another one of those ornate Hull pubs, the Manchester Arms here. Again, in the same period that those other ones have been built that we'd looked at, really from sort of 1896 through to about 1904, 1905. This one's dated 1898, because it was possibly called not after the city of Manchester, but after a boat probably named after the city of Manchester as well. And the first whaler was called that came into into Queen's Dock in 1778, and therefore would have had to come up the river by then, by here, and that might be where it took its name from, the very first whaling ship that came into Hull. So not much really up the further upscale lane. It's all fairly modern properties on there. And this now brings you to the junction of sort of Lowgate. That's the main road that goes up there that we've seen before when we looked at St Mary's Church, comes out by the post office and the front of the Guildhall. The road to the left is Market Street, which will be going down. This is the top end of Silver Street. We'll be coming down into the middle of Silver Street later on. But because it's got many fine banks along this, so I'll say it's a banking quarter, or the former banking quarter of Hull, I would have to say. This was built, mostly its life was owned by the Midland Bank, later becoming HSBC, because it was built in 1870. Because there were banks seem to be on all corners of this part of Silver Street as well. And a lot of these buildings, the stone actually is Ancaster stone, as it's called, and it's a limestone that has come from Lincolnshire. So it's been ferried across there. So I guess it came up the River Trent or something like that, because if you go across the Humber Bridge, it brings you into the chalk wolds of the Lincolnshire wolds, similar to the wolds of the Yorkshire, East Yorkshire as well. So that's what that is. It's now called Dirty Dick's, a lovely name for a pub. It's obviously closed at the moment, and that's why we see here the road ahead being closed, because of the pubs being allowed to spread out across the roads here. So that's why that road closure sign is there for the COVID regulations. Bit further down, as you'll see on the film, is we come across the front of the Market Street frontage to Hepworth Arcade. It's worth standing back a bit to see how ornate it is above it. It's a bit plainer on the Silver Street side than it is on this side as well. I'll be going down there on the next leg of a talk when we come down here to begin with, to go Silver Street and the land of green ginger. So this was built in 1895 for the Lees tailor Joseph Hepworth. There was quite a lot of rivalry amongst these ready-made tailors at the time, Burton's as well, and because they all built fairly ornate shops and things like that. So these were the people who were doing sort of really the first sort of mass manufacturing of clothing around there at the time. So Hepworth had their first shop in here, and also did Marks and Spencer as well in there, because there were 26 shops in that arcade. But as I say, we'll be coming down there. A bit further on the right-hand side, nearest next door to that, is B. Cook and Son. I must profess to forgetting to put the interior photograph of this in, because when we had a visit there in 2016, I think, they allowed us in to their showroom and upstairs as well, because it's quite surprising from this sort of shop here that sells sort of all sorts of marine instruments and things like that. Upstairs, they actually have a cartographic section, and they were producing maps from all over the world see maps of coast, I think it was of Africa, we'd had a look at, is that then shipping could they update them here, and shipping then could buy these as paper maps, or we could send them electronically to them. And I think that some of these ships also sent back changes in sort of water depths and things like that from the shifting sandbanks and things like that. So surprising, all that happens upstairs here in Hull. They're basically the OS maps of the world, not from Southampton, where I think the OS people are established. So they all come from B, Cook and Son. Next to that, as you can just see on there, is the side of this is the Old Bell. This is a pub that's down this alley. It's been there since around about 1791, where sort of stagecoaches used to come in here. And it's sort of hidden here on all three sides, one by two of the sides by Trinity Market, and others by the sort of side of the Hepworth Arcade as well. So it's always been hidden from view. It's never really had a street frontage at all. It's always sort of had buildings in front of that. So we see here next door to that, that's why it's got the blue bell here as a sign of where it is, to give it some sort of prominence on the street. Here we see the Trinity Market here of 1904. They had tried to sort of destroy this, clear this area in 1962, and that would have included the old Bluebell as well, but somehow they ran out of money and never got round to it, and therefore both the market and the old Bluebell still stand. We'll be going in for a trip into the market around there. It was, when I was down there a few weeks ago, it was fairly busy on the inside as well. It seems to be, because they were quite well established. There weren't many shops which had their shutters down, so it all seemed to be open. Largely, I guess, food, some dry goods on the bit where you come in from Market Street as well. There's all sorts of entrances into it. So you've got the sort of Market Street, and then you've got the North Church side entrances. That's the most ornate of the entrances. But there are little entrances in also from Hepworth Arcade, tucked away in the corner. So it's sort of a bit of as they come in from all directions into that. So that's sort of the losing my place down here, because they've got a very fine Campanile type tower on the outside. That's on North Church side as well, opposite obviously the Holy Trinity Church down there. So because they just finished on Cook and So next door to that, that was because it was an optician's shop in 1840, and B. Cook has been in there since 1933 as well. So because they produce, manufacture their own sort of devices, in marine devices in there as well. So this is sort of a North Church side that comes down the side here, and we're coming to the sort of east end of Holy Trinity Church, because they built 1300 to 1530, because in various, but it's best seen from this end, because this is where you can see that it was actually nearly totally, well, it was wholly built in brick, and since then that's been covered over with, because there's some lighter stone as well to give it sort of that more churchy type feel. But this is where you can actually see the brick of it coming all the way down here. And it was built, it wasn't a parish church at all. This was the in the King's Land, as I mentioned. There was two churches in the manor of Hull. The one at St Mary at Lowgate, which was in the manor that belonged to the de la Pole family, because the king didn't purchase that land, but he had the land here. And this church was established as the Chapel of Ease to Hessel, whereas the other church was the Chapel of Ease to North Ferriby. And it's quite unusual, even at that time when the church was first being built, it was much larger than the church at Hessel. This is 270 feet long, and it actually didn't come disestablished from the church at Hessel and to become a parish church in its own right until 1661. It's no longer called Holy Trinity, which I think is a shame, really. It's just called Hull Minster, and because it was given that status in 2017, probably in that year when it was sort of the city of culture in Britain as well. So we'll see the church from the other side as well, but like I say, it's best seen from this side and the great east window, but it's all, as we'll say, on the inside. That's wholly Victorian glass. So moving along there to the end of the street where it comes out at Castlegate or Castle Street, down there stands the statue of King William, or King William the Third, William of Orange, 1650 to 1702. It stands on top of a public toilet, which is actually very ornate, but unfortunately it has been closed ever since I've been coming to Hull. Is that it's always been locked up, but it's like an Art Deco toilet in there, and I guess it's a similar to one which are now closed under Queen Victoria in the Queen Victoria Square, and probably similar to those ones which will eventually hopefully reopen on the waterfront by the pier along there, which I mentioned right at the very beginning along there. It was sculpted, this statue, in 1774 by the Flemish sculptor Peter Scheemakers, and like I say, it unusually depicts him as a Roman emperor, because he was king 1689 to 1702, and Gusset was paid for by public subscription. And Gusset, it was done by the Flemish sculptor largely because of its connection between Hull and its trading links with Holland and the lowlands around there, because obviously it being Flemish, that's sort of the part of Belgium. So that's what stands there. There's a pub opposite here, which sort of, I think it's called the King William, that comes to an end, and its gable looks onto Castle Street. And this is what's on it at the moment, because this was put here in 2000 and I think it's 2020, so only sort of last year this was put up by two artists. This one here, I guess it's a pun on the poet Philip Larkin, called Larkin Out. That's by a bloke called Dan Kitchener, who's known as Dank, his handle, I think, as they call them for people who do this. I guess it's all legal because it's done by through Hull's Bankside Gallery. People aren't quite as taken with the geisha girl here because there doesn't seem to be any sort of reason why a sort of Japanese influence mural should be on there, whereas the sort of consensus is that people quite like this for its brightness and its pun on Philip Larkin. So that stands opposite Castle Street. So if you're driving along that A63 going out towards Heddon and the other side of East Hull, that's what you can see at the side there. Probably won't last very long because this sort of area in front of it is I think it's going to be called the Glass House. It's going to be a glass-fronted building according to the drawings, and it's going to be that's going to be built as apartments around here. I guess there might be some sort of shops on the bottom floor or something like that, or offices, but that's what will take place in there. That's probably why it's been given permission for that. So let's look at the bit of film coming down Scale Lane as far as here. So the next section we're going to go on is sort of doubling back along Marketplace. I can't draw the walking line through Hepworth Arcade, but starting here, coming down this L shape, coming across here, then I'm going to look across the road at the pub Old White Hart, which is down an alley over here. Like I say, accessible from Bowl Alley Lane as well. So it's part of these sort of network of alleys that sort of link between the main roads. Unfortunately, at the moment, the pub's closed, and actually the alleyway is actually blocked off by a door, so I can't get down there, but the photographs are there from earlier. Coming down Silver Street, that's where the former Midland Bank was, on that corner. Then we see two banks, former banks, again on the corner down here. And then I'm going to turn right here to come down the land of Green Ginger to the George Hotel, to look at the smallest window, which is in this building here. Just continuing down here to, I'm going to say, quite a fine building. You'll see a difference between the photograph I've taken and the one which has appeared on the film. That building is used as a tattoo parlor, but you can see here how it connects through and comes out by Alfred Gelder Street, where the large block of the Guildhall is as well. At this point here where B is, there's a plaque on the wall saying a bit about the land of Green Ginger. Rather an unusual place, I must say. It'd been sort of better off at this end of it. And then again, after this, I'm going to come across the road for Trinity House Lane. So let's have a look at this section coming down here. This is the Hepworth Arcade, which I guess I've mentioned before about here, a couple of minutes ago. It's notable coming down here for the joke shop here, Dinsdale's, which I've checked up on again. That was founded here in 1978, unless it was one there previous to that, but that's on their website. It gives that a date of establishment. I thought it'd been there a lot longer. And here's probably a more modern type thing, a gin school. There's quite a few of those that we've seen. I think there's one down the Humber Dock Street as well, is that where they brew where they distill their own gin and vodka down there. But again, this is quite a popular thing at the moment because there's so many distilleries around. I think when we looked at the sort of that trade about a year ago, I said that there were at the time over 50 distilleries in Yorkshire, and I think the first one was founded in something like 2012, so a very popular thing to do. So no wonder they can have tasting sessions of over 100 British gins produced at the moment. So this comes down here. This is a sort of an L shape. In this corner down here is that there's an entrance here, or a little doorway that you can actually sneak off into Trinity Market as well. Lovely canopied structure, because it's a shame this is the only one in Hull, and because it was very popular, obviously, in Leeds when we come to look at Leeds perhaps next week. It depends on the weather that we've had, and a bearing has gone on my wheel as well, and depends on whether I get that car back. He says it's going to take 2 or 3 days. So we come out of the, as you'll see on the film, the other side onto Silver Street, and nearly opposite, but just a tiny fraction up a bit, is the entrance to the Old White Hart. As it says there, it was the Visit Ye plotting parlour in which on St George's Day 1642 the first blow was struck and gained for Parliament, and thus commenced the Civil War, which ended in defeat and death of Charles I. So this is where you go down this, and the pub is just down there. This is the plotting parlour they talked about. I'm afraid that the detritus left on the table was after our visit there in 2016. So it's a bit dark, the photograph as well. But this was sort of, they held a meeting here really because at that time they had a Catholic governor of Hull in 1688, and they wanted to get rid of him really for that purpose. That was all part of that sort of the whole issue of Roman Catholics dating back to when Henry VIII founded the Church of England. and there's this sort of problem with the Catholic, well, Catholics had really up until 1826. So Catholic sympathizers were looked upon poorly because they thought they were going to sort of bring back Roman Catholicism to Britain. So that was a reason why they wanted to get rid of him. But in fact, under the Religious Toleration Act, is that a lot of non-Protestants were allowed to practice, but not Catholics. And I don't think people from foreign sects from overseas as well. So there's always the fear of that. And obviously we had the Jacobite rebellions later on as well. So there's always this problem about Roman Catholics coming back, and therefore that'd be why they wanted to get rid of him. So coming down back onto Silver Street, because we have two banks, because we'll come across this one, because that stands at the beginning of the next section. But this one here, this very ornate one, because it's Portland stone above, but it's got these huge sort of channels, I would say, down the side of that. That was built in 1907, and one time was a NatWest Bank, and then became a Royal Bank of Scotland, and it's now called Silver's. It's sort of a restaurant and bar. So we're going to, that's Whitefriargate straight ahead, because we'll be looking at that at the end. But I'm turning right here to come along the land of green ginger. That's another picture of that. Sorry, Silver's restaurant. I forgot to change that from looking at it. So that's the land of green ginger down there. It's a oddly named street and probably well known in Yorkshire for its that, but it's probably got its name from warehouses that stored ginger in here. And because Silver Street also probably got its name from that as well, because when the ginger came in, it was very expensive, this sort of quite a delicacy, I guess, and very unusual, but it was obviously very powerful as well. And when it was imported, is that the ginger was actually green, but when it matured, the skin turns that silvery colour. So that's probably why you get the land of green ginger and Silver Street there. Although it sort of doesn't say that, they say on that plaque, which we'll see at the end down here on the piece of film, is that they don't really know why it got its name. This down here is the pub or hotel. It's a coaching inn called the George. Sorry, that's an earlier photograph. It was a bit sort of dark on it. So this is where the coaches came into here as well. But what it's most notable for is on this wall, just before that entrance, because there is this narrowest window. This is the window here. I'd say it's probably a couple of inches wide and about 12, 14 inches deep down there. As it says here, the George Hotel is one of Hull's oldest surviving public houses and dates back to 1683. It's a home of England's smallest window, which is rumoured to have been used in the days when the George was a coaching inn. A porter was seated at the window from the other side to watch for the coaches so as to give immediate attention upon arrival. So that's that. It's very easy to miss, that is. I think the first time I went to Hull, I was looking for it but couldn't see it because there's obviously quite a few plaques and things like that, but you're not realising it, how narrow and thin it is there at all. And because that's the land of green ginger, could say, but it's sort of why it's called that. Right, let's move on down to Holy Trinity and its square. So we're coming along Trinity House Lane along here. So coming opposite there, this is Trinity House, which is like a mariners guild. They actually own almost the whole block of this. It used to be a Carmelite friary along here, and the land was given, because when that was abolished, to the guild here. So they still own almost the whole of that area today. We're coming across there into the Church of Holy Trinity, or Hull Minster is here as well. And the statue of Andrew Marvell's here, and behind that is the old grammar school, which is this building here. So let's look down there then. This is the another former bank here as well. That was built in 1897. It used to be called, until I guess 2017, the William Wilberforce, or certainly when I first gave this talk, it was called William Wilberforce, and now it's just called Yates, which is rather unfortunate in a way, sort of erasing part of the city's history in there. There's rather a lot of work going on down here at the moment. So I've taken this from Google Street View to give a sort of a better indication of it. So you'll see when I walk down here, there's scaffolding along here, and there's scaffolding along buildings over here as well. And it was, as Google has found, it's sort of, I think you need to come along here probably about midday in order to get a more even light along here. I guess they've taken this fairly early in the morning before the pedestrians and other things come along here. So just coming along here, then we'll see just a couple of things along here. On the left-hand side is this Hull Fish and Chip Shop institution called Bob Carver's. They've been in the city since I've lost my place again now, 1888, and opened this restaurant in 1980. I think the successive generations have been called Robert Carver, and certainly the previous generation, he died in 2018, he was called Bob Carver, and I think it's run by his wife at the moment. So it's closed at the moment, I guess, until probably next week when that will reopen again. Coming further down, we have the Trinity House. I mean, you can do a talk on Trinity House, and it's rather a shame, really, is that I think I rang them to find out whether we could have a visit around there, but they only took sort of 4 visits a year or something like that, and then said that they could put me on a waiting list and it would be 5 years. Well, we probably would have had that visit in 2020, so no doubt that would have been cancelled anyway. But yes, we ought to put our name down here. This is Postern Gate that goes down the side there. It says a TW up on there, and that refers to the I think it's the area that it's in for voting purposes or something like that, which I read and then couldn't find again. So that's why it's got TW Postern Gate on it. It's probably the West Postern Gate or something like that, but it does refer to a political division within the city of Hull. So this is Trinity House. I can say it's sort of you could do a talk on it, but unfortunately, like I say, it's hardly ever open for visits around it. It was a religious fraternity, so it set off a guild, such as when I gave the story of the merchant adventurers up in York, and they had their own guild, own hall as well. And because they set off as a religious fraternity, and then because they then later became a guild, probably around sort of 1500, 1600 or something like that. And then sort of grew to license the Humber pilots, and and it still looks after the boys, and it maps the estuary bed. It puts out the boys as well. The Humber pilots now do it off Spurn Head. This building dates from 1759. The very fine pediment up there. We can see another building, part of it later on, which is the chapel, but we can see the rear of that now. We never used to be able to see that, but we can only see the public entrance to that, whereas the side inside the quadrangle in here is actually the main entrance to it. And behind here as well, because they're hidden from view, is also, they also had almshouses in here as well. We can see some external almshouses when we have a look at Postern Gate a little later on. But looking up into the pediment up here, you can say it's very fine because it's still dated 1759. I guess it includes the arms of England, Scotland, Ireland, France and Hanover. That's sort of, again, the link back with William III as well. So I'm not going to show you any more of that because you can't see inside of it. But that brings us out onto Trinity Square. And because this has sort of been laid out several times around here, because when I first went to Hull, I think it had some sort of gardens in front of it, and the square was laid out in 1999. And I guess there's work going on it down here as well, especially on the south side as well. I'm not quite sure what they're doing down there, but I can say it's sort of, there's all sorts of earth diggers and things like that. So it looks like it might be more repair of the pavement rather than the church itself, because there's really no scaffolding on the church apart from on the south transept on the lower part of that. And so this is now laid out really as a public square for events and things like that. This is North Church side. That's the side of the Trinity Market. And that's its Campanile type tower. There is or was a plaque down here. I think they've sort of restored this type of thing. I don't think the plaque has been put back on. But the plaque said in 1856, Thomas James Smith opened a chemist shop here and sold cod liver oil to hospitals. In 1896, he was joined by his nephew, Horatio Nelson Smith, and Smith and Nephew was founded and now is a global medical business. And they still have their headquarters and manufacturing plant in Hull, because if you come in on the A63, I think part of it is on the right hand side there between the A63 and the waterfront along there. So that's the sort of history of Smith and Nephew. So coming around here is that so that's the North Church side. They say I couldn't see, there used to be a blue plaque on there, so whether it's removed elsewhere or not, I don't know. And I guess the square in front of it, I guess they've opened up for events and things like that. It's closed at the moment, but I guess the church might open again on, I can't say Monday because I think it's traditionally closed on a Monday, but I think for the rest of the week it's normally open all the time. But when I was here the second time, is that an event or something was going on and the church door was open, so I've taken that photograph of the inside of it as it stands at the moment. And I do believe, from having read this, is that you can see here they've moved the pews, they've taken the pews out down here and left the pews at the side. These are quite ornate with its carving on there, but all these pews date from 1840. Its oldest part of it is the font that we see here, because there came a parish church in here, and because it was encased in stone, such as the St Mary's at Lowgate did, and that was also encased in stone by George Gilbert Scott, because it was restored here by him 1859 to 1872. And we also see that Cuthbert Broderick's nephew, because they had a large practice in Hull, a lot of the buildings in Hull are by Broderick in conjunction with other people. And he came in and did a further restoration in 1906. So I guess now what we're looking at is probably how the church would have looked in medieval times, because they wouldn't have had any pews in there, because they're very open and because they're very light. These large windows have largely been there to stop the weight of stone on it. So it's always been a very light, bright church. I'm going to say most of the stained glass, that is all Victorian. So it would have all been sort of plain glass inside of there as well. Just looking around, these are from previous photographs when it have been in there, when it has been open, because they be very fine nave ceiling there as well. And what else? I'm just trying to find the mouse. There we are. Because that's the chancel down there, as well. So we're having a musical recital in there. Like I say, there's not a great deal of antiquity in there. It's just a very large church. And I guess these restorations have emptied it of most of its things. Like I say, the Victorian glass in there as well. And sometimes that's a bit more modern than that as well. Just a few, recumbent effigies down here as well. And a lot of these were destroyed in the Reformation and in the Civil War as well, because Hull, through its governors, largely the Hothams, kept changing sides, but obviously the Puritans sort of won at the end of the day, and therefore there aren't many sort of medieval effigies left in here. That's just probably about the only one that there is. It's members of the de la Pole family, but not William de Pole. I guess his might have been destroyed. Probably one here when we're sort of picking up on the sort of the seafaring industry of Hull. This is the Gall Chapel, which is to the left-hand side of the great east window, and it was the Gall was a deep sea factory ship based in Hull, and she sank sometime on the night of the 8th and 9th of February 1974 in gale force 10 storm conditions, where the waves were over 9 meters high in the Barents Sea off northern Norway. No distress signal was received, and the loss was not realized until the next day, the 10th of February, when she twice failed to report in. An extensive search operation was launched, but no trace of a ship was found apart from a lifebuoy, which was found 3 months later. All 36 crew were lost. The wreck was eventually found in 1975 and surveyed in 1998 and again in 2002, confirming that it was the ship Gall which had sunk, and I guess it was flooded and couldn't cope with the conditions out there. We'll look a bit more about trawlermen because there's another memorial to them in the city centre that's been placed there in 2016, which we'll see a little later on. So coming outside of the church, looking around the square, then we find the statue of Andrew Marvell, born 1621, out at Winstead, sort of quite a lot further east, going out towards sort of Patrington and Spurn Point out there, and his father, I think, was a part of the Holy Trinity there, and the reason why he went to the grammar school, which is located directly behind here, because he was that's why he came here. And at age 13 he went to Cambridge University. He was MP for 20 years for Hull and a trade associate with Trinity House, also well known as a metaphysical poet as well. So where he went to school is immediately behind him here, and it largely dates from sort of 1585. It wasn't originally built as a grammar school, but it was sort of really again for another guild that had it here. And in 1583, when the grammar school, because they only had the bottom part of this here, so these. There's some inset stonework here, which has got the date 1583 on regarding to the grammar school, whereas upstairs that remained a part of a guild hall room, later becoming an assembly hall as well. Not only did Andrew Marvell go here, William Wilberforce was also a pupil here as well. It closed as a school in 1878 and then moved out of here. It's the upstairs part of it is now part of the Hands-on History Museum. I have been in, but not taken a photograph. I think it was 2012, and probably didn't have my camera with me, but it sort of looks at the sort of Victorian history of Hull, and it's one of those sort of eclectic ones where it looks at it as a schoolroom, but it was never a schoolroom up here, because the school was always below that. And it's also got a two 2,500-year-old mummy and all sorts of things in there. And later on, like I say, after it was used as a guild hall, it then became an assembly room for dances and concerts. It's free to go in, but it's only open on the 2nd and 4th Saturdays of a month, and only from 12 noon to 4 o'clock. So like I say, that's free to go in to have a look there as well. And I think that sort of takes in the sort of the area that we've looked around there. So let's have a look at this piece of film. So Trinity Square. So let's move on to the final leg of this. So coming down Prince Street, which is a very fine one here, again sort of following Poston Gate, then coming along Dagger Lane. This is called the Mission here on this corner. Then I'm coming up here just to look at a couple of buildings. This is Carmelite House. This again belongs to the Trinity House. And this building up here, nearly where we just see on that last photograph, is called the Harry Lazarus Hotel. Again, it's linked to those emigrants that came in from Russia and Poland and things like that, and being transshipped across from Hull across to Liverpool and then onwards to Canada and America. Then coming out onto Prince's Dock Street partway along, I'm just looking at a couple of buildings here, but one of them is here called the Sugar Mill, which is quite a large building, belonged to Joseph Pease as well, who had the Pease warehouse right over on High Street, further over there as well. Coming down here, and again coming into this entrance, this was the main sort of doorway, sort of 1842, that led into Trinity House Nautical School. They moved out in 2013, and this area is in here now is a car park. So when I come down here, you'll see some a car coming around the corner, and we go past the entrance into here. So if you come down Dagger Lane, you can actually park in this car park in the middle there. And I think it's fairly reasonable because I think it's £1 an hour or something like that. And like I say, you're slap bang in the city centre, but it's sort of well hidden away. And this is where we can see the back of Trinity House Chapel, which is this building here. Then coming back along here, then I'm going to look at some of the buildings on Whitefriargate and then end up here. This is Beverly, the former Beverly Gate, which is part of the old defences of Hull. And that's the only part which remains standing. And then just finishing here on Monument Bridge, because that's where we set off just across the road with Queen Victoria across there. So this is Prince Street. I can say it's mostly features on lots of brochures on Hull as well. It was built here in 1771. Very pretty and ornate. That's where we're going to walk down here. And when we came here in 2016, we walked down this street and were stopped at the other end of the Dagger Lane. I didn't bring my flash with me. I don't think that on that day we came. A man came round the corner and asked, what we were doing, and said we were having a visit around Hull. Would we like to come in? And it was a former Wesleyan chapel. And really what they've done is built an outer wall which had a staircase in. And that's the width of the between the original chapel wall and the wall of today was just this width of the staircase, and you could go upstairs. It's used now as a Masonic hall. To say it was I guess it was built in the late 18th century, the building. And again, we're given a view around the Masonic hall up there. And because it was part of the Minerva Lodge, or Minerva Lodge, however you want to pronounce it, that was formed in 1782. They bought the premises in 1802 and then added that sort of external frontage onto it to enlarge it to use the, I guess, get a staircase in to the upper floor as well. So this really, I guess, as part of the chapel would have been opened up right up to the roof space, and they've put in another floor to create additional space in there. That's the reason for putting the staircase in. So that's the sort of blank wall that you can see towards on the left-hand side toward the end of Princes Street. No, sorry, yes, Prince Street. And then we come onto Dagger Lane. This is the one that connects through to Castlegate down there. And they're obviously so named because in medieval times, that's what you could purchase along here. And really what we're seeing here towards the end of the street on the right-hand side, because we're getting a bit of a side of it, is what is called the Mission, or as it was originally called, the Mariners Church of the Good Shepherd, constructed in 1927, which actually looks sort of a lot older than it is. And the adjoining proper on Dagger Lane, which is this property here, just going back a bit, if I can find the thing, this property here, that was built as the some almshouses as well. They were called the Seaman's Rest. We'll see some additional almshouses as we come down here. So we're going to look at this property just stood back here, a property over here just beyond this one that belongs to the church, and then the Harry Lazarus Hotel is this white fronted building. So that's where I'm just going to come down to sort of the Postongate Street, and that comes out, that's the tower of the Trinity Market, and really where the post office van is, that's near enough where we crossed over Trinity House Lane into the Holy Trinity Square around there. So you could actually walk down this bit, but obviously want to come down the other way to show that. So this is the Postongate. So we're just coming into there where that vehicle stood. When I came to take the photograph, it had gone. This is called Carmelite House, so called after the Carmelite friary that stood in this area around here. It was built in 1826 and as almshouses for 23 seamen and their wives, and then converted into offices in 1956. So that's what we can see there. On its roof, it had rather large ornate, I think, unicorn or something like that as part of that. That unicorn is now in front of a chapel, which is sort of near enough immediately behind here. And it's in front of a main entrance to a chapel that's only accessible through Holy Trinity itself into that area. So that's what is immediately behind this area. Again, they had additional almshouses in that square just a bit further over down there as well. Across the other side of the road, this very fine building, I guess it probably doesn't need any explanation at all because it says so there. The parochial offices of Holy Trinity and St. Mary, AD 1864. Quite a fine one there as well, and even into the cellar space as well, plenty of lights. And I'm going to say serve-free party hire from here as well. That's the next building. So coming further along, I say near enough at the end, that's where that plaque that says Postengate on it, and the blue plaque there says this was well known as the Harry Lazarus Hotel. I first misread that. I thought it said Barry Lazarus, which was quite amusing. But again, this is where people came to be accommodated. I'd imagine they just slept on the floor or something like that, because I guess it was part of a sort of charitable institution. I guess they are still owned by the Holy Trinity. That's where people pass through here. No doubt there've been hundreds of people in there at a time before they went down to Paragon Station to be picked up and transported across to Liverpool, and then on their long voyage across to North America as well. So let's turn around and go to the very end of Postengate, and that comes out here, and this is where we're looking at here, but this gives the wider view of Prince's Dock Street that runs all the way down here, and the Prince's Dock as well. This connected through to what is the Marina today. So boats could really do a dog leg through Hull. They could come in at the far side of the River Hull, come along what was Queen's Dock, and at the end of here where Monument Bridge stands, that was the link of a lock between Prince's Dock here and the Queen's Dock around the corner that ran all the way down there. And again, behind me, I'm coming down these new steps. This is from that new bridge that was installed in April this year. So that's where it brings you out. I think that's a Pizza Express, oh no, it's an Ask pizza restaurant around there. Large part of this dock has been taken up. It was built the dock was built in 1829, originally called Junction Dock, because obviously that lay between the junction of two docks as well. Because the other side there's a railway dock and the Humber dock as well, but renamed in honour of the Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, after a visit here in 1854. And again, really what we're looking at here is the original wall of the citadel, of the outer wall of the wall that surrounded Hull itself. That's why we come down here. We find the Beverly Gate just behind this property here. So that's sort of where it was built in line along there. And just coming over here, just to look at a couple of buildings. So really these two. So if you're coming out of sort of Postengate here, this is the sugar mill, and this is the building next to it as well. It's got a blue plaque on it, and all I can see, all I'll just is read it out to say that it was the building was the former building that was owned by Newton Brothers. It was founded by Holborn Sir Alfred James Newton. Born 1845, died in 1921. He was the first chairman of Harrods and Lord Mayor of London in 1899. So that's what that is there, to Furley & Co. Coffee, tea and cake. This is the sugar warehouse just up there. Like I say, it's a car parked in front of it. It'd be interesting. Plaque on the tops there is a date stone of 1831 and built for Joseph Pease. I say the man who had the Pease warehouse. It was also importing seeds and other things like that on the River Hull here as well. I say most of these properties, the sugar mill, as it says, is where sugar was imported into the city, and a lot of these places have now been converted into sort of bars and restaurants. And again, across the way there, the Prince's Quay Shopping Centre that was built on stilts out into the dock and opened in 1991. because it's quite large and airy on the inside, but it's full of the usual suspects that you get in a shopping centre. And because I haven't been in it recently to see how popular it remains. But that's the sort of the larger shopping centre. And I can say it sort of has an overabundance of shops. Hull has, and they're of quite a large size as well, which is a problem. And I can say when we come to look at the fourth journey around Hull, looking from Paragon Station round where the former BHS shop is and things like that, is that gives it a lot of problems in converting these larger shops probably into smaller shops, into like again a series of department stores in there. It's probably the only way forward with some of these. So coming along here, this is the main entrance of 1842, as it says in the keystone above the entrance there, that went into the Hull's, the Trinity House Nautical School, founded in 1787 to train boys for a career in the Merchant Navy or the Royal Navy. And I say when I first went there in 2000, and when photographed it in 2012, is that these pupils were all walking around the city centre, and they all wore a Navy type uniform, so they stood out from there. And I say, despite being here from 1787, in 2013, the school moved to George Street in the city centre. And like I say, the now has been opened up this inside, which I guess was their playground, into this car park. It's called, they've now renamed it Zebedee's Yard, and it's named after the headmaster of the school, Zebedee Scaping, a great name that is. He was born 1833, died 1909, and he was headmaster of a school here for over 50 years. There's some little plaques on the inside of there giving the dates of the other headmasters as well. But they call this Zebedee's Yard now, and like I say, it's open up now for car parking and also events as well. And so we see two properties here. This is the Trinity House Chapel, but this is the rear of it. So this is the public entrance that was into it, whereas those, I guess, people who were on the board of Trinity House came in from their private entrance the other side. This is the very ornate, it's called the Last Trip. It's a memorial to 6,000 and more trawlermen who have lost their lives, who have set sail from Hull. It was meant to be a temporary memorial that's placed here in 2016. But it seems rather than remove it to where it's going to have a permanent home on St Andrew's Dock, they've elected to put some, I guess, cut out figures of trawlermen. I think there's 14. I've not seen this yet. And that has been placed on St Andrew's Dock as a memorial to those 6,000 plus men who have lost their lives as part of this. It's quite interesting, this. I think I need to go to Hull at night, because this cutout here, it all lights up at night, so you can actually read what it says in there with a light, sort of a backlight coming through there as well. So that's called the Last Trip, and stands, I say, right next door to the Trinity Chapel. I think you can walk down there and come out onto probably another part of the main shopping road a bit further on there, probably onto Whitefriargate somewhere. So let's return back onto the Prince's Dock Street, and this is Rowland House. It never used to be called known Rowland House when it was first built in 1822, but was known as Ferry's House, F-E-R-R-E-S, and because they're the people who donated the money to build it as an almshouse, and it's sort of linked somehow with Trinity House, and we've got the coat of arms up on the top here, and a lot in motto. You can't quite see it up there. It says Speres Super Sidera, probably pronounced completely incorrectly, but it translates as Hope Beyond the Stars. So I guess it's for those people in the almshouses. So there's actually quite a number of almshouses in this area, two owned by Trinity House, and I guess that one next to the Mission, and then this one as well, because they're all within a couple of minutes of walking distance of that. So that's Rowland House, and then we're going to meet onto Whitefriargate. I guess the street gets its name from the Carmelite friary that stood on the right-hand side down here. I'm going to say was founded in 1290. And because the benefactors of that being Edward I, the founder of Hull here, and the de la Pole family here as well. Dissolved, like all friaries and abbeys, by Henry VIII in 1536. But even before the dissolution, Trinity House was established here and paying rent to the Carmelites as well. But when it after the dissolution of the monasteries, the lands were gifted to Trinity House in 1621. And they still own this whole block around here, right up to Trinity House and Postongate Street. So they must have enormous income coming in from here as well. The street here was pedestrianised in 1975. There's some quite fine buildings down here as well. Unfortunately, at the moment, quite a lot of them have disappeared, these shops have, largely because of this one here, which we're going to look at. This is the former Marks and Spencer's shop. This was built in 1931. Again, sort of faced with sort of Portland stone and such like. And as you can see here, that's empty now as well. And some of the other larger shops which were down here have gone as well. The building next to it, this very fine one stuck in here, oddly was actually built as a pub, and this was in 1884. I think it's now a sort of a meat dealer. I wouldn't say it's a butcher's, but I think they sell meats in there. So that's what that very fine building is there. That's on the left-hand side if you're going down there, but as I say, it's you can see it can be next to a former Marks and Spencer shop. A bit further down on the right, because you have to look up along this road down here. This is the former Neptune Hotel, and what was built in 1795. I don't think it made enough money, and this was also an assembly room, so where the great and the good of Hull would come for, I guess, been acting as a restaurant, and you'd come here for dancing. But from it in 1815, it became the Customs House, because it's got a very ornate plaque and swaggers up here above it, and that's basically what it says in there. The Neptune Inn, I think it says above there. But you see, it's sort of other types of things down here. So this was taken fairly recently as well. But coming down here, the one that abuts it, which you've got this central pediment in there, but it's all part of one long building. This was built as Smith's Bank. I guess it's got a row of 29 windows along the front. So we're just looking at the central pediment here. And you say that's got sort of sea gods and maritime figures in it. And it was built in 1830 for the bank. And I say it's now shops. I think it's on the ground floor today. It's a boys shop, B-O-Y-S. They're the people who have their head office up in Scarborough, and because they have them all over the place as well. I think there's one in Ilkley out this side, and I think they have about 29 or 30 shops. So let's double back again to the end of this street, and where the Prince's Dock Street comes up, and turn left where we're going to head towards the end here. This is sometimes, I think there's some call it the basket or the bin or something like that, because of the amount of litter that collects in it. But this down here is the former gateway into the city. This is the Beverly Gate, and because if you look down into it, that's the sort of the base of it. It was built in 1340. It was 1330. First in timber and then in brick. So if you remember what the North Bar looks like at Beverly, that still stands, it's sort of contemporary with that, and would have looked like that as well. And there were 5 gates leading into Hull, and there also, I mentioned right at the beginning, Poston Towers as well. That's why Poston Gate gets its name as a street. It was destroyed in 1776 when the new dock was being built around here. The walls stood around about 20 feet high, and it was notable here. I think I might have a plaque here. No, I don't, but it's on the film. Is that where King Charles I was refused entry into Hull to get at his arms cache by Sir John Hotham. This was on the 23rd of April, 1642. And this is really one of the turning points, or the major spark points of the English Civil War. Hotham was executed for treason in 1645 because he kept changing sides, and Charles I was beheaded in 1649. So the final shot is from Monument Bridge. Like I said, this is where the statue of William Wilberforce stood at one time. And this bridge stands on really on the lock that stood between the Prince's dock here that we see and the Queen's dock that's now been filled in behind there as well. And I say this dock closed in 1968, and I say the shopping centre was built on stilts across there in 1991.